Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, my dear respected viewers, those who are attending the Aqeedah Sanusiyyah, we begin our lesson today by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue, and we pray that Allah make in this lesson a blessed one, a lesson where our sins are forgiven, our prayers are answered, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with iman and taqwa, and bless us with the understanding of deen, and may Allah bless us with husnul khatima. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. So inshallah ta'ala, before we enter in our lesson today, let us do a bit of revision of what we have mentioned in our previous class. In our previous class, we were speaking about the proof for qiyamuhu bi nafsihi on sifat salbiyah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is self-dependent. And there are two meanings to this. Number one, that He is not in need of a locus to subsist in, لا يحتاج إلى المحل. And number two, لا يحتاج إلى المخصص. So number one, He is not in need of a locus to subsist in. And we mentioned that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in need of a locus, of a place, or a thing that He subsists in, then He must be an attribute, a sifa. And a sifa does not subsist in a sifa. A sifa does not subsist in a sifa. This is what we mentioned. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in a sifa. Allah is an entity, a that. And laysa kamislihi shay, there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is not in need of a place to reside. No, na'udhu billah min zalik, and He subsists in something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of a locus, or not in need of a place or space. And this is different from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the characteristics is that we are in need of a place to reside, or we take up space. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the same as the makhluk. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, laysa kamislihi shay'un wa huwa as-sami'ul basir. There is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everything that is ascribed to the makhluk, we have to negate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a very important principle in the Aqeedah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And this is based on clear verses in the Quran. This is amongst the muhkamat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Ikhlas, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٍ, there is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is why we negate everything that is within the makhluk, that it is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason why we say that if we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala subsists in something, then He must be a sifa, and Allah is not a sifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He is a sifa, then He cannot be ascribed with sifat al-ma'ani, because any sifat does not subsist in sifat. A sifat subsists in an entity, that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has the sifat al-ma'ani. So He cannot be a sifa, and at the same time He has sifat al-ma'ani that subsists in the sifa. And the author mentioned what is the reason that it is not permissible. So maybe we take a look again at the text. It's basically where we are in our last lesson. Yani inshallah ta'ala, yani today yani we go into wahdaniyah. Before that, and he mentioned the understanding of the qualitative. Before that, this is basically any what I mentioned earlier. Self-subsistence, and it means that the divine entity is free of needing any locus or determiner. So there's two things. And number one, any is the mahal, and number two is mukhassis. Mahal, any is any the locus, and then we have any the mukhassis, any is the one yani who brought him into existence. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is not any in need of something else any to specify any his existence, and this is impossible any for Allah. That is easy any to understand. It is an intrinsic and self-sufficiency and freedom any from needing a locus or determiner for Allah's any entity. Self-subsistence is therefore composed of two portions: freedom any from needing any locus and freedom from needing a determiner. The rational proof for the first portion is as follows: if he, the exalted, were in need any of a locus, that is to say, if he were in need any of an entity in which to subsist, just as an attribute subsists within one described with it, he will be an attribute. This is what I mentioned earlier. Yani, if you were to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is need of something else any to subsist, then he must be an attribute. But Allah yani is not an attribute. If he is an attribute, then he cannot possess sifat ma'ani. But Allah yani, what you call it, has any is ascribed any with sifat and ma'ani. If you were in need any of an entity in which to subsist, such as an attribute subsists within the one described with it, he would then be an attribute of something else, which is a meaning among qualitative any meanings. Nothing but an attribute needs any locus. An entity does not need any locus in which any to subsist. If it were possible for an entity to subsist within another entity, as what we mentioned, that it is not any possible any for an attribute and to subsist in an attribute, yani to enter into an attribute, sifa to subsist sifa. Likewise, it is not any possible any for an entity to subsist within an entity. Yani it is not any possible any for something any which is that to subsist any in that. It is impossible. If it were possible any for an entity to subsist within another entity, that would entail that latter entity also subsists any within an entity. So this will goes back any to infinite any regression. If you were to say that every entity is any subsists any within one another, then it will be never ending. It will be never ending. And all any entities any subsist any within one another, and this is any impossible. This is because receptivity is a quality of every entity. And the moment you say that one particular entity and it has the capacity and to subsist in another entity, then this will mean that all any entities and will have any the same any characteristic. An attribute is not described any with qualitative or predicative any attributes, because if an attribute was receptive to having another attribute subsist with it, the other attribute will be receptive any to the same. So qualitative attributes do not subsist in qualitative any attributes. What is any the meaning of qualitative attributes? Yani in Arabic and we call it, in Tawheed we call it sifat al-ma'ani. Sifat any al-ma'ani is sifat wujudiyah. Yani it is something any that is in existence. An attribute any which is in existence, different any from sifat salbiyah, because any sifat any salbiyah is not in existence. I mentioned many a times, and maybe I repeat this so that it will be clear, and inshallah ta'ala, there is a reason anyway I repeat all this, because for the fact that for 2 weeks and we don't have class, then sometimes these things and it might be difficult for some. When we say sifat and salbiyah is not in existence, and what is the meaning? Again, it means when you say sifat salbiyah, for example, sifat al-qidam, example, al-qidam wal-baqa. Al-qidam, Allah has no beginning. Yani we are negating beginningness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are saying that beginningness is not in existence. This is what we meant when we say sifat salbiyah is non-existence, because we are negating the impossibilities for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So salbiyah meaning to negate any something. So it is not in existence. But it is different from sifat ma'ani. Sifat ma'ani is in existence and it subsists within the entity. So here the author is saying that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will subsist into something, then he must be a sifa, which is ma'na min al-ma'ani. Ma'na min al-ma'ani. And not salbiyah, not any sifat any salbiyah, because sifat any sifat salbiyah is not in existence. So here he is speaking about the qualitative any attributes, and also sifat ma'nawiyah, ma'ani and ma'nawiyah. So this is impossible for them to subsist a qualitative attribute to subsist in a qualitative attribute. Because if that is the case, as what we mentioned, that it will lead to infinite regression. That means that all qualitative attributes can subsist in other attributes, and this is impossible. This will lead to all attributes subsisting within one another, and it is impossible. This is what he mentioned. If an attribute was receptive to having any attribute subsist with it, he is speaking about qualitative attributes. Then other attribute will be receptive to the same, thus necessitating an infinite regress, as what I mentioned, and an ending in a series of existing things without end. So this is basically our revision. And then after that, we spoke about the qualitative attributes and predicative attributes. So in Arabic, we call it the ma'ani and ma'nawiyah. Ma'ani is mentioned as qualitative, ma'nawiyah is predicative attributes. Now the author Sheikh Said Fuda, he explained further to speaking about the difference between salbiyah, and we have another attribute that is nafsiyah, for example, and then ma'ani and ma'nawiyah. What are the differences, and what are the type of attributes that we are referring in this particular topic? So he said the understanding of the qualitative and predicative attributes is that they are described with essential or negating attributes. So now he's saying that a qualitative attribute. Let me give an example. I gave this example also in our last lesson. An example of sifat ma'ani or sifat ma'na. Knowledge is an example of a qualitative attribute. It is an example of a qualitative attribute. It subsists within an entity. It does not stand on its own. This is the nature of qualitative attributes. It is existent, but it subsists within an entity. Can a qualitative attribute be ascribed to sifat salbiyah and sifat nafsiyah? The answer is yes. This is what the author is saying. How you ascribe sifat ma'ani to sifat salbiyah? Sifat salbiyah, the definition is an attribute that negates. It is something that negates. It is an expression that negates something that is not within its definition. So, for example, we say the attribute of knowledge. So now, what can we negate when we speak about the attribute of knowledge? So we say that it is not ignorance. Knowledge is not ignorance. This is an example of salbiyah. To negate something. To negate something that is not within its definition. So the meaning of salbiyah, let me make this clear. The meaning of salbiyah is basically to negate something that is not within its definition. So for example, let us give an example of human beings. For example, if you see for example someone who is hearing, you say that this particular person is not deaf. This is an example of salbiyah. A person hears. So what does it mean? It means that he is not deaf. A person is blind. A person is able have the ability to see. We say that he is not blind. So this is an example of sifat salbiyah. You are negating something that is not within the definition of the qualitative attributes. Now, so that is why we say that qualitative attributes can be ascribed with sifat salbiyah, and also nafsiyah. Nafsiyah is basically speaks about existence. That this particular attribute is in existence. For example, if you possess any knowledge, the knowledge exists in you. It is nafsiyah. When you possess any knowledge, we say that is not any ignorance. Knowledge is not ignorance. This is any salbiyah. So these are so many of the examples. So now the author is saying that they are described with essential or negating attributes. Essential meaning goes back into nafsiyah, or negating any attributes in salbiyah. Such as saying, for example, now he gives an example. Allah's knowledge exists. This is nafsiyah. So the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in existence. This existence is essential attribute, as all other qualitative attributes. All other qualitative attributes, they are wujudiyah. They are in existence. As what we mentioned, different from sifat and salbiyah, they are not in existence. So the existence of every attribute is essential. Nafsiyyah. In describing the negating attribute, we said Allah's omnipotence is pre-eternal and endless. For example, we say Allah possesses Qudrah, and Allah is Qadir. And this Qudrah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no beginning. Now this is Sifat Salbiyyah. We are ascribing any Salbiyyah to the Qudrah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say Allah's power has no beginning. Allah's power has no ending. Now, the power of Allah is Qadim. The power of Allah is Baqi. So this is an example of ascribing Sifat Salbiyyah to Sifat Ma'ani. Allah's omnipotence is pre-eternal and Qadim and endless, Baqi, and so on. Allah's omnipotence is not the same as other. The power of Allah is not the same as other power. Now, this is what you call it Sifat Salbiyyah, yani from Salbiyyah. The same is said regarding Allah's knowledge and other qualitative attributes. Likewise, when we speak about the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say the kalam of Allah laysat biharfin wala sawt. We say the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, has no beginning. The kalam of Allah has no ending. The kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the same as other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth. So this is an example of Salbiyyah. At the same time also we must understand, when we speak about Salbiyyah, we are speaking about the definition in the Arabic language. And when we say Salbiyyah, again, it's about negating something that is not within its definition. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to focus on the 5 Salbiyyah of all the qualitative attributes. It is not the case. The meaning of Salbiyyah, when we say that the qualitative attributes is ascribed by Sifat Salbiyyah, is that you can ascribe Sifat Salbiyyah to the qualitative, and it doesn't mean that it goes back to the 5 Salbiyyah which we ascribe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here the meaning of Salbiyyah is a general meaning, because last week somebody asked 2 weeks ago somebody asked the question that if we follow the 5 attributes of Salbiyyah, that when we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we apply it to Sifat al-Ma'ani, one of it is Qiyamuhu bin Nafs, and we are saying that Qiyamuhu bin Nafs meaning not in need of a locus. So here we are specifically speaking about the attributes of Allah. But when we speak about general meaning of qualitative attributes, we say that it can be ascribed by Sifat Salbiyyah. It can be ascribed by Sifat Salbiyyah, and the meaning here is general, not necessarily we are speaking about the 5 Salbiyyah which we speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then after that, he mentioned the attributes are only conjugating attributes because in of themselves they are non-existent and without an external reality. This is what I mentioned earlier. They are not in existence. This is Sifat Salbiyyah. As for qualitative attributes, I just hold this now. As for qualitative attributes, they are existent, and the predicative attributes are inseparable for them. When we say qualitative attributes, they are wujudiyah, as we mentioned, they are in existence. And the predicative attributes is a result of the qualitative attributes. It is an extraction of the qualitative attributes. So from Qudrah we have Qadir, from Kalam we have Mutakallim, from Haya we have Al-Hayy, and so on and so forth. So anything that we speak about qualitative applies to predicative, because they are inseparable. All this we mentioned last time. It is proven both rationally and textually that Allah is ascribed with qualitative medicative attributes. That means He is not an attribute. This is basically what the Aqeedah is speaking about. That Allah is what you call it, not an attribute. Allah is not an attribute. Allah is an entity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has any attribute. So He is an entity, not what you call it, only an attribute. Rather, He is an entity that does not resemble attributes. Hence, He does not need a locus. The rational and proof for the second portion is that He is free from needing a determiner is as follows. If He was in need of a determiner, the meaning of the determiner in Arabic, and we call it mukhassis, the one who specifies. So we say that it means a person who specifies, for example, the existence, or specifies the place, or specifies the time. Here we are speaking about something else that bring him into existence, and this is impossible. If he was in need of a determinate and subject doer, he would be contingent. Yani if Allah is created, yani is brought into existence, then he has a beginning. If he has a beginning, then he is a creation and he not a creator. And he cannot be na'udzubillah min dhalik, and he cannot be God. All this we mentioned in when we speak about the proofs of the al-qidam, the pre-eternality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All this we mentioned already. Based on the aforementioned rational and unequivocal proofs that he is not any contingent, this is proven false. That Allah is not contingent, so it is impossible that he is in need of a mukhassis, to what you call it, bring him into existence, and it is impossible. So this is basically the revision for our lesson 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Today's lesson will be the next. This is going to be our today's lesson, and today I will not take any much time. Just to give you some summary or some ideas about the rational proof of the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the translator mentioned here the rational proof for Allah's oneness. So here we are still within sifat salbiyah. So sifat salbiyah we have 5. Al-qidam wal-baqa, mukhalafatul hawadis, qiyamuhu binafsihi. Now we are on the 5th one, wahdaniyah. Wahdaniyah meaning the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wahdaniyah has 2 meanings. Number 1, we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one in number. Number 2, we say Allah is one in essence, and He is not compounded. He is not made up of parts. This is the meaning of wahdaniyah. And this is also the meaning of the word ahad. That's what Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Ikhlas. Qul huwallahu ahad. Say that Allah is ahad. There is a difference between ahad and wahid. Wahid is one in number. Ahad is one in number and one in essence. Ahad is one in number and one is essence. Not only we say Allah is wahid, we say Allah is ahad. So the meaning in ahadiyah is the same as wahdaniyah. There are various categories of divine oneness. The oneness in divinity, in uluhiyah. The meaning of oneness in uluhiyah, meaning He is one. He is one. There is no other than Him. No other than Him. And He is the only God. The one and the one and only. This is the meaning when we say when the author mentioned Tawheedul Uluhiyah, not the Tawheed and Uluhiyah of the Wahhabi. Tawheed and Uluhiyah of the Wahhabis, follow Ibn Taymiyyah, who mentioned that Tawheed is divided into 3 parts. That their definition is different. This is not the Tawheed and Uluhiyah that is mentioned by what the author meant. Here what the author meant basically to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one God, the one divine, the divine entity, the one divine God. This is the meaning of Tawheedul Uluhiyah, because the word Uluhiyah comes from ilah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, wa ilahukum ilahun wahid, your ilah, your God, is one. This is the meaning of Tawheed Uluhiyah, and there is no difference between ilah and Rabb. There is no difference. Allah is ilah. In the Quran at times Allah mentioned wa ilahukum ilahun wahid, that your Lord is one Lord. And at times in the Quran Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ascribed Himself to Rabbul Alameen. He is the Rabb, the one God who owns every of His creation. So there is no difference between ilah and Rabb, in a sense that we say Allah is ilah and Allah is Rabb. There is no difference in the meaning of ilah and Rabb. And from this linguistic meaning of ilah and Rabb, it comes the word uluhiyah from ilah and rububiyyah from Rabb. But the tawheed of what people call as the movement of the Salafiyah or the Wahhabiyyah, they basically follow Ibn Taymiyyah, who is the first to divide Tawheed into 3 parts by saying Tawheed Uluhiyah, Tawheed Rububiyyah, and mentioning that the those who worship the idols, they they believe in Tawheed Rububiyyah, but they do not believe in Tawheed Uluhiyah, and so on and so forth. All this is basically falsehood, and rebutting it, and it is a lot of ulama ini by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rebutted any this ideology. And this is any one of the ideologies any which is dangerous, any especially nowadays, and you find that takfir any is being done based any on this separation any of tawhid any into the three parts. Ala kulli hal, I wrote an article I think 3 years ago any on this, on what you call it, I translated a part any of the fatwa of Sheikh Ali Jum'ah on this, and basically a lot of scholars and he mentioned about this. So just I need to take note for those any who are reading any this kitab. Do not any be confused. Do not be confused, because nowadays any this kind of things any has to be explained, and because people are in, a lot of people any are in any confusion. Any how does any takfir any occurs any by this segregating any this tawhid any into three parts? Yani by them any saying any, for example, that those any who do tawassul, they believe in the rububiyyah but does not any believe any in the uluhiyyah. So they are the same any as the idol any worshippers who say that Allah any is their Lord, but at the same time any they worship any the idols. So that is why the idea any of takfir any occurs in this ummah. Any a lot any of people are subjected any to takfir any because any of this ideology. And the moment any you do takfir any to a person, that person is murtad, and murtad is halalud dam. And this is any one of the things and it is happening in akhir zaman, that you find any Muslims any killing another Muslim by the claim any that Muslim any has apostate. And this is what is happening. And in reality we see this any with our own eyes, and what we see is happening in Syria, what we see is happening in Iraq, on the idea any of ISIS and killing Muslims and so on and so forth. So it is something and which is important. And if you are learning any tawheed, then you should find out, read up about the history any of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, history any of Ibn Taymiyyah any, for example, and how any those any who came any after him followed any this ideology any until today, and how any it result any to killing, how it result any to bombing and so on any and so forth. And basically any result any to a lot any of terrorist any acts which gives any Islam any a bad name. So all this any traces any to the creed and in reality, yani the understanding any of their form any of tawheed. Ala kulli hal. So now when we go back into the kitab, and the author any mentioned, of course any what I mentioned any earlier, of course this is any not really any the topic any of discussion. The only thing I want to say that, because any of the word any uluhiyyah, I feel something any has to be explained, so that some of you any might not be thinking any something else. But to speak any about the subject any requires any some time. Requires any at least any 45 minutes any to speak any about what is meant any by their version and so on and so forth. The oneness any in action. So we have now yani author any saying tawhid uluhiyyah, tawhid sifat. What is the meaning tawhid uluhiyyah? Any meaning Allah is one, yani ilahun wahid. This is the meaning of tawhid uluhiyyah. Tawhidul af'al, and meaning the action any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala any is one. Yani the action any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything any comes any from Allah. Any Allah any is one any who created any everything. And then we have the oneness any attributes, none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possess any the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then oneness any in entity, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is one any in number and one in essence. Oneness in divinity points into the fact that Allah is the only one God. Now this basically what is the meaning? The meaning of wahdaniyah. In other words, He is the only one uniquely described with divinity based on the fact that every contingent possible thing is in need of Him. Everything else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is not in need of anything. He is the one who brought everything into existence. And He is not in need of anything, whereas everything other than Him is in need of Him. Oneness in actions, and He points to the fact that Allah is the only doer. Everything that happens, it happens by Allah. This is the meaning of tawhidul af'al. Everything happens by Allah. Everything that happens, any good and bad, everything happens by the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the meaning of tawhidul af'al. So here the author is basically explaining any further. Oneness and in actions, and he points to the fact Allah is the only doer. In other words, Allah is the only creator. No, none other can create and to bring something from non-existence and to existence. Oneness and in attributes, and he points to the fact that He is the only one who is eternally living and self-subsistent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who is wajibul wujud. Wajibul yani wujud. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the only one who is eternal, because any of the attributes of Allah is eternal, qadim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is qadim. So tawheedul sifat, none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possess the attributes of Allah. Other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are all contingent, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pre-eternal and eternal. Oneness in entity points to the fact that Allah is a truly existent. Now, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is created, makhluk. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who is wajibul wujud, His existence and He has no beginning and no ending, and other than Him comes from Him. And then the author mentioned the rational proof for Allah's oneness, and he says as follows: if He were not one in His entity or attributes or actions, then nothing of the universe, be it substances or accidents, would have existed, because He would have been incapable. So basically what the author is saying, now the author is speaking about what is the proof of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the proof of the oneness of Allah? So the author is saying in the beginning, and he says that if Allah is not one, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not one, nothing in this universe can exist. I repeat, if Allah is not one, if God is not one in His entity, attributes and actions, then nothing in this universe, he said, be it substances or accidents, would have existed, because He would have been incapable. And this is basically what Allah mentioned in the Quran: لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهِ لَفَسَدَتَا. If there is other gods than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be chaos and destruction in the heavens and in the earth. Why is that so? This is the proof that the author will speak about. So he said, further clarifying. So now he make the statement, now he speak about evidence. So you have a statement. What is the statement? The statement is that if God is not one, the universe cannot exist. If God is not one, the universe cannot exist. This is a statement. What is the evidence? The evidence is coming. So he said that further clarifying this, we say that if there was something similar to Him in divinity, it would necessitate that both He and that thing are incapable, whether they are in cooperation or non-cooperation, or had apportioned the act of creation between them. Each of these categories must either be by choice or by compulsion. So now the author is saying, if there is something similar to Him in divinity. So now the example will be that there are two gods. Just for the sake of trying to understand this evidence that the author is putting forth. As though he's saying, imagine that there are other gods other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning there are two gods, for example. God is not one, there are two. So now there are a few possibilities. When it comes to creation, either they agree to create something, or they differ to create something, or they work with one another to create that particular thing. So these are the three possibilities. And each of these possibilities, either they are false or they are not false. So this is going to be the evidence. The evidence behind the wahdaniyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala, we will speak about this in our lesson next week, inshallah. And the reason is, because any time is limited, and if I speak about this evidence now, I will not be able to cover the whole thing. I think it is better for me once I start to speak about in Aqeedah we call it the Burhanu Tamanu. Burhanu Tamanu, and this is based in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about subhanallah about the evidence of his oneness in the Quran. So when you are speaking to people and people ask you what is the evidence that God is one, you say God must be one, and God cannot be many. What is the evidence? The evidence is this Burhanu Tamanu. Yani the three things as what we mentioned, which inshallah ta'ala we will cover in our next lesson. So inshallah in our next lesson we can complete the evidence of wahdaniyah in one shot. So inshallah it will be easier for people to understand. Inshallah I will stop my lesson here, and we'll continue in our next lesson. I do not know if okay, no question I believe. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم الحمد لله رب العالمين.